it was all during that. I had this like one class that I still remember. It was like the politics of international aid and development.
Priscilla Kim Ong, welcome to Rising Giants. We are so excited to have you on today's show to talk about your life, talk about your experiences, and also, most importantly, just to have a good time. So, welcome on to the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk with you both.
Yes, yes, we and we are too. Maybe just a great place to start is to give the audience a little bit of background about yourself. Those of you, a little background about yourself, maybe some of the work that you're currently working on today, and yeah, just to get give them a little bit of insight.
Yeah, sure. So I'll reintroduce myself. My name's Priscilla Kim Ong. My Khmer name is Sela. So a lot of people here in Cambodia know me as Sela. Yeah, so I'm a Khmer-Krom American. I was born and raised in the US, and then I moved to Cambodia about 2.5 years ago after graduating from college. The main reason I came here to Cambodia was to learn Khmer, the language, and really just reconnect with my roots. I felt like I was really disconnected from them for most of my life. And so that was my main reason for coming here. But also the reason I wanted to learn Khmer was because I was also really passionate about human rights and indigenous rights advocacy for my communities. And so I felt that I needed to learn Khmer in order to really contribute and serve my communities and also learn from my communities. So yeah, it was a personal decision, but also I guess career-wise as well. Yeah, so that's why I came to Cambodia.
Oh, that's great. And just for the again for the audience, so Kamai Krung, could you go a little bit into kind of explaining a little bit about that background?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a really good question. So Khmer-Krom in Khmer language, Krom means lower or bottom. And so it refers to the people, Khmer-Krom people from Kampuchea-Krom. So if you know Kampuchea is Cambodia in Khmer and Krom, it's like lower Cambodia. So if you look back to history, that Cambodia used to be a lot bigger, as most people know. And so the southern part of Cambodia actually used to be what is now current day southern Vietnam. So extending from what most people know, for example, Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, that actually used to be a huge hub in Cambodia. And so all of that down to the Mekong Delta is Kampuchea Krom. I think actually it starts above Saigon, but I don't know exactly the borders. But anyway, so there's still tons of indigenous Khmer people living there in Vietnam, what's now today Vietnam. So Khmer Krom, it's this community of ethnically Khmer people that have been there for centuries, that are now living under Vietnam.
Got it. And your family is or your background is in from your full family heritage is from that area. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So my mom and her entire, excuse me, my mom and her entire family were for I think as long as all our generations are from there. So it's interesting if I look at like the timelines, I think my grandmother or at least her great grandmother probably lived during a time where it was still considered Cambodia, probably at least my great grandparents or something. But my mom grew up, she was born and raised when it was Vietnam. And so I definitely grew up with a lot of Vietnamese culture as well, speaking Vietnamese at home. Interestingly enough, I knew a little bit more Vietnamese than I knew Khmer. Like I didn't know any Khmer at all growing up. But my mom, she does speak Khmer, my whole family as well. But so bi trilingual in that nature, speaking Khmer and Vietnamese and English. So yeah,
Wow, what a combination. That's
yeah.
quite a combination. And so can you talk to us a little bit about your early life and what was it like what was it like growing up in a household that was with all these like mixed cultures, I would say.
Yeah, I would say now looking back, I'm so grateful for it. I think growing up, I grew up in a really small American town on the East Coast, kind of like probably an hour from Boston area. So I did not grow up with Asian friends or really Asian community around me. And so when I was young, I definitely struggled, just with like being different and I didn't really know how to embrace my culture. And I think that was also a big reason why I never really connected with my roots, my Khmer roots at least. And it was always something I wanted to learn more about, but I just felt like there just wasn't really resources, and so it took a long time, but I did grow up going to temples occasionally, like for
Hmm.
holidays, like Khmer New Year and stuff, with my mom. So she would bring me to one like in Massachusetts, like in the next state over. But it was um, it was something I think that really has driven my entire journey up until now. I think me feeling so disconnected for so long is really ultimately what has pushed me to be so dedicated to learning Khmer and to learning the culture and living here in Cambodia.
Hmm. And so what kicked off it sounds like for a very long time you had thought about wanting to get more connected, but then actually taking the step to come, and I believe is it in 2022? Is that when you officially when you came to
Yeah.
Cambodia? That's
Yeah, I
right.
came in June 2022, so I just had graduated from university like a couple weeks earlier. And the thing I would say in college was when I really uh, had that kind of life-changing moment where I started to really reconnect. And so I studied international studies in college, and I was really, really always passionate about cultures and sustainable development at community level as well. And so at the same time learning about like international development and sustainable development and aid, I was always thinking like, okay, whatever I end up doing in the future, I do want to help my communities. Like
Hmm.
I would say I always felt like, at least in the spaces that I was in college and like grew up in, I just rarely heard about Cambodian communities and Cambodian development and stuff. Especially living in the U.S., I feel like we typically always hear about Latin American development because it's just so close to us. So I
Hmm.
always felt so disconnected from like Asian studies and stuff. I did study Asian studies as well. I minored in that, but it was all during that. I had this like one class that I still remember. It was like the politics of international aid and development. And
Hmm.
we had this project where we needed to select like a sustainable development project in another country that was actually going on. And so I picked one from the UNDP and I did like this kind of analysis of the project. And so I was like, okay, like I think one day I would want to go to Cambodia, or like one day maybe I want to work for UNDP. And that is kind of what's like I started to learn about that, and I think it was like I had a phone call with my mom because I went to school far away from family, and so
Hmm.
I was just telling her about this, and she, I think funny enough, at the same time was kind of going through this learning journey of realizing that we kind of the history of being Khmer-Krom. Like my
Hmm.
mom, she of course knew she was Khmer, but she grew up in Vietnam, and so I think she also was undergoing this like awakening with her identity and history. And so she,
Wow.
at that time, had introduced me to this organization that works. It's also a community for Khmer people in the U.S.,
Yeah.
but an organization that was advocating for human and indigenous rights for Khmer people. And so it was at the same time where I was like studying about Cambodia and Khmer communities, and then I found a way to kind of relate it back like to my own community. And I was found out there was like a lot of issues going on in our communities, and so that was kind of the big spark. And then from there I just like it lit a flame, like a fire under me, and so I started
Wow.
basically doing everything I can. I I was that person, like I made everything in school about that after that.
Hmm.
So like I would make I would figure out a way with my professors to make sure I could study that, or make sure I could do like I created my own internship just so I
Wow.
could work on those issues to like get class credit for it. Like that wasn't typically something you could just do, but I was like, I was that type of person that email like sends a long email to your professor to like try to fight for something, because I'm
Yeah.
definitely like you just have to ask. The worst thing they'll say is no, right? So
Right.
typically professors, like if you give a good reason, like and really a lot of thought, I feel like they're like okay, let's do it. So yeah, I did it. Like I did an internship with that organization, and then I just managed to get school credit while also doing like work that I love, that I was really interested in to help my community. And so, yeah, that was like the whole start, the real like thing that
Yeah.
pushed me into this.
Wow, that's incredible, and especially with with going kind of in parallel with your mom at the same time as she was going through something separate yet similar in terms
Yeah.
of the of like having more clarity on that identity too. So I'm sure that was, that's a really special experience and bond to share with her, like during that time as you're, taking that next step from, from university to like early, adulthood in your career.
Yeah.
That's a really special experience to be sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really
yeah.
appreciate that. It was really hard to grasp, I think, at the beginning to realize that, oh, actually my mom is also still learning about her
Hmm.
identity and her history. I think a lot of times, especially for kind of like first, second generation kids, like it's it can be hard to learn about your roots and if your parents aren't telling you, and you just like assume, like, I don't know what we think, but they just didn't teach us. But then I realized it's because also my mom was still learning and she didn't really know everything about our history as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it's on like a personal note. I myself am a first generation American. Both my parents are from Czech Republic, so
Mm.
growing up, didn't really learn. They kind of they I wouldn't say like kept it from, but they wouldn't really go out of their way to explain like the what they grew up in and that kind of stuff. It would just randomly come up in conversation. But now
Yeah.
being older and having the time to like sit down and ask more of like the challenging questions and being a little bit more like understanding, it's a really it takes that next level of relationship that you have with your family member too. That's really really cool.
Thank you. Yeah,
Um,
and thank you for
yeah,
sharing. I didn't know that about you.
yeah. So let's go ahead and fast forward to, taking your first steps into Cambodia. What was that like once you touched down?
Yeah, I still remember like coming. So this was actually my second time ever in Cambodia in 2022. So the first time I came was 2020, and at that point I hadn't undergone the awakening, we could call it. So like I didn't really know anything about Cambodia when I first came in 2020, and it was only a couple of days. It was like a spontaneous trip because we were in Vietnam, and yeah, I did like I went to Angkor Wat and stuff, but at the time, like I said, like I didn't speak Khmer, I didn't know anything, and so when I came, it was from 2020 to 2022. I underwent this huge transformation where I really wanted to learn about everything, and I had started learning some Khmer back in the US, just like very basic. And
Mhm.
then when I came to Cambodia, I was so excited. Like I really wasn't scared. I wasn't nervous. I was just ready to come. And then I remember getting off the plane and I had like family members that I had never met before coming to like pick me up, and like I remember they had a little sign for me and it was just so sweet. I felt so welcomed.
Yeah.
I actually lived with my family when I first came here
Mhm.
for almost the first year. Yeah, and it was like family I hadn't known my entire life.
Mhm.
Um,
What
and
was that
so,
like?
yeah, that was definitely a special experience. Like I'll always cherish for me. It was definitely different because I grew up, not only grew up in, like as an like American culture,
Mhm.
but prior to coming to Cambodia, I was in college. So I went to college in California, and as I mentioned, I'm from the East Coast. So like I was already kind of on my own. Like I was living in San Francisco on my own. I felt very, I would say, quite independent. And then
Yep.
I came to Cambodia, moved in with family. Actually moved in with my grandfather, who's like just quite a very traditional Cambodian man. And so I was at the beginning I was loving it, right? Like I was like, okay, I'm getting the real local experience. And it's very wholesome. After a while, though, I was like, okay, I can't go out at night past sundown, and I'm not used to this because
Yeah.
it's like yeah, he's just a very like he's traditional. He's also just so worried about my safety. I felt like everyone was so worried about my safety when I came here, and so I understood. So I basically was like, okay, like at least, the reason I'm here is to learn Khmer and to reconnect. So I did try my best to take advantage of it, like spending time with him, spending time with my family. But I would definitely say it was hard at times,
Yeah.
but so worth it. I think I learned a lot during that time.
Yeah, and I think kind of bringing it back to learning the language. I feel like a lot of people when they first come to Cambodia, you have the excitement of learning the language and you sign up for 10 classes, and then you really start getting into it and you realize, oh wow, this is a lot harder than I would have ever expected.
It is so hard, yeah.
It is and speaking from experience of it's Max and I both, but it's such a
We actually
different way.
we took lessons together.
To learn
Yeah.
Khmer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How was that?
It was quite funny. Well, we had to do them on online because we were doing them together because Dom wasn't necessarily here at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
But we'd have to be like motivating ourselves to like do the homework and
Yeah.
but I think if I were to restart it, I would definitely lean towards doing it in person.
For sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was so funny. Like, I mean, the homework was you have like a tomato, and then it's just like taking you all the way back to like the preschool kindergarten days of like, oh man, I'm really struggling right now.
Yeah, it's so hard. I think especially learning a language as adults, you want to be so much further ahead than you literally can be, and I think that's what makes it so frustrating and so I think kind of discouraging. You're not at the level you want to be right away, because ultimately when most people want to learn a language, they just want to be able to talk to people, they want to be able to understand people and talk to people. But one thing, especially for Khmer, it's like you have to start learning to read and write, and that's quite honestly the last thing most people want to learn is when they just want to be able to speak and understand if they come to Cambodia. Reading and writing, I mean, Khmer has like the largest alphabet in the world, and so I think it's such a difficult thing. Like, it's like, okay, I can't remember the letters, I can't remember how it's supposed to sound, and I'm just trying to speak, and all I can say is like, hello, my name is, and that's about it. I totally feel you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting because that's also like how some of your social media journey started is sharing what it was like learning the language.
Yeah. I think that's what makes it so fun, like my content, and I think that's why a lot of people resonate with it, as especially other like Khmer diaspora, specifically Cambodian-Americans. It's like we all kind of, okay, I won't say all as a general statement, but a lot of us do not speak Khmer fluently. And some of us kind of know a little bit here and there from our parents or something like that. But it is funny, like learning, like it's really comical, like the things we have, like that we go through, like the realizations we have learning the language. And I love sharing about how it's been, because it's been hard. And I make so many mistakes. And I think that's what's funny, because we all have been there. We all make those kind of mistakes when learning the language. Yeah.
And so you mentioned there about like adapting to the culture, the language. What about the work environment? What it was like, working with good neighbors and starting to understand like how that's different to the US and things like that, and with some of the work that you were doing.
Yeah. So, yes, I started working for my NGO probably about 6 months after I moved to Cambodia. So, like, my first 5 months was focused on learning Khmer. And I guess I got to a good enough point to be able to work, because, like, one of the requirements for the job was you need to be fluent in both Khmer and English. And I saw that, like, on the job application, and I was like, I'm just going to apply.
So did they give you a test?
So they did like a verbal test. Luckily, it wasn't written, because I probably would have failed. I can read and write a little bit, but like at a second grade level. And luckily, I had an interview, and there was like 3 interviewers. And then the last question was like, okay, we're going to ask you this in Khmer. And he just asked me like, oh, why did you like come to Cambodia and stuff like that? And I was like, yes, because I get that question every single day when I live in Cambodia. So I already kind of had, like, I knew how to answer it in Khmer already, because I always have to answer that question. So I think I sounded very natural and confident saying it. But if he asked me like anything else, I probably wouldn't have done too well. So I feel like I got lucky, but at the same time, yeah, my Khmer was good enough. And so, but overall, like working there has improved my Khmer so much. I think way more than studying in a classroom ever did. I think for me, immersion is like the way for me that it works for me to learn a language. It's really hard, but I think it sticks more. But in terms of the whole work environment, yeah, most of my coworkers, I'd say like 90% are Khmer, and then we have some foreigners, and then actually my organization's Korean, so we have some Korean staff as well, and so I just like it was so different to be having to use like professional language in Khmer, which I didn't learn. Like I learned a lot of that professional language in Khmer, but also just it was really nice because I think work environments in the U.S. this idea of kind of like very professional. I mean, I didn't work in corporate or anything before. I mean, I was in college before, but the idea of like the business world or professional world in the U.S. I think it's quite different here in Cambodia. Like I think things are a bit more casual in the office, at least at my office, but what I've seen a lot here in Cambodia, which I kind of like. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to, like, it's kind of like we all recognize that we're just human and we're just normal people. So we don't
Right.
have to, like, put on this, like, professional front, which is really nice here in Cambodia. Like, one thing I noticed, this is like a small thing, but I feel like it's really symbolic, is like people will, like, wear just, like, flip-flops or just no shoes in the office sometimes. And I think in the US, that's just like unheard of unless you work in like, I don't know, a yoga studio or something, you know? But here it's just like so normal. And like, I think we just give, because I guess it's the culture, but it's like we just give each other so much grace. Like, okay, I want you to be comfortable. I don't expect you to like, you know, that kind of thing. Or even when it comes to food, one thing that was like huge for me, like people bring their own lunch. And like they'll heat it up in the kitchen, and then it's like this really strong scent of like fish or something. In the
Provo.
US, yeah, prahok or something, or like just super strong, and it'll fill the whole office, and nobody bats an eye. It's just so normal. And then in the US, I think people like there's actual rules that you can't do that in certain offices in the US. Like you can't bring fish or like something smelly, right? And I think like that's what I'm like. Oh, this is nice. It's kind of like more homey in that sense. So
Yeah.
I do love that about working in Cambodia.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like I think in a lot of like these more serious work environments, like everyone's just wearing a mask and they're not really actually being themselves. So
Yeah.
it's just a lot of performance.
Yeah. I will say though, there is that, and then on the other hand though, I think of course there's the whole other side to like Cambodian hierarchy and like and professionalism that's really different from US culture. So like of course there hierarchy exists in the US as well, but I think in the Cambodian context it's quite different. Of course, age, sometimes gender in a lot of cases. And I would say I'm one of the probably one of the younger people in my organization. And I would say I also moved up kind of fast in my organization comparatively. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that is not necessarily common in Cambodian workplaces. I think more and more it's happening, but that was also something I felt like it was unspoken, but I had to kind of like think about is like, oh, how are people perceiving and responding to like just my position, like me being here, kind of the space that I take up. It's like not about what I did or what I said or anything, but it's just like having to kind of know where you stand or like how people are gonna feel about like just who you are. It's nothing I can't change that I'm young or like a woman, but
Right.
you know, yeah.
Right.
So
And what are the main projects that that Good Neighbors works on?
yeah, so we actually work in almost every major sector you can think of, especially when it comes. So our main mission is to create like a world without, with peace, without hunger, and so we focus a lot on poverty and children and community development. One of our main things is child sponsorship. So you can sponsor a child, which helps them to go to school. It helps them to be able to get health checkups, and a lot of that also goes to community development projects. So we work in education, health, water and sanitation, also the like income generation and trying to build partnerships and networking and stuff. So it's really, really broad. But a lot of times you will see that the large focus is on children and protecting children and pushing them to go to school and creating better access and quality education for them. So there's so many things. It's like it's similar to a lot of NGOs. There's like so many different projects. You could go down a whole rabbit hole in each sector. Yeah.
And how much time do you spend outside of Phnom Penh? I presume a lot of the projects requires you to go to the provinces, and what's that been like for you?
Yeah, so for my organization specifically, we work throughout Cambodia, but we do also work in the city. So we do have an urban project or program as well. Luckily, I am able to kind of work from one place most of the time, but I do have to go to the province maybe every few months or something. So it's not too bad. I actually recently did a work trip to the floating villages. That's one of our areas that we work. And so I spent a week in the floating villages, which is an amazing experience. And it's something I'll never forget. I remember when I first started working, I went there and it was like my first month working. And then I had to go to the floating villages and I was really like, okay, wow, this is the reason we're doing this kind of work. You really are faced with like poverty and you're really faced with the issues that people are actually facing. And, you know, when you're working in the NGO space, especially when you're working in office, you read all these things and like a little project description, but you get to go see it in real life. It's really, really impactful, I think, on just like your mindset about the work that you're doing. Yeah.
And how is that kind of related to the your other side, which is the content creation and building this following over the last few years?
Yeah.
How do the two kind of relate?
Yeah. Funny enough, I actually keep them completely separate.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I keep my entire NGO work in world separate from my social media mostly. Like I have posted a couple of times to share that I do work for an NGO. I've actually never shared with my community what NGO I work for or like exactly what I do, but I'm more open to it now. I think the reason is because I think like I could make content about that and people would love it, but I think I wanted to keep it for myself and like keep it like, okay, I work full time on this. So like in my free time when I'm making content, I don't also want to be making content about my work, you know, but I think it definitely, so in a way, it fuels like a certain side of me, like a certain need. Like I do feel the need to contribute to communities and give back and it's also a way for me to learn, like learning about Cambodia and the issues that people face here. And then for my content side, I think it's more like more fun, I guess, like in the sense that it's more palatable. It's more like, haha, I made this silly mistake. Let's laugh about it. But I think it could get really serious really quick if I were to bring a lot of my NGO work in because it's not all fun and happy. We work with a lot of people in vulnerable situations. And I guess I didn't want, like, I'm not a big fan of, I guess, focusing on that on social media. Like, you know, when people like, I guess they call it like poverty, you know, the second word, like, you know, like, I never want to be like, I think just it's a personal thing. Like, I don't like if people do that, that's fine. But I feel even like taking photos or like videos of regular people, you know, and posting it, I feel like
there's something a bit weird about
right
that.
like ethically I just don't know, or morally I just don't know if I don't feel comfortable. Like and I won't say I've never done it. Like I have posted photos of just like people out and about and stuff. So it's kind of a hard balance, right? Because like in one ways I do want to show Cambodia and I want to show like the communities here and stuff, but I also have to recognize like I have a very large following. It's not just like my friends and family, so it's like another responsibility. I need to make sure I'm not just like posting everything, right? So yeah, it's a balance. Like I do want to shed light on it, but I guess there's enough people doing that already in terms of that. So yeah.
And talk us through how it all got started with your content creation journey. When did you kind of realize that you were the content that you were putting out was really resonating with people? Yeah,
so I started posting, I still remember, the end of January 2023. It was right before I got my job. And before that, I was really, really low key when I was living in Cambodia. I rarely posted. My social medias were all private. So I didn't go public until then. And then I just started posting like my day to day kind of thing, like things that I was learning that I found interesting, whether it was about Cambodia or the language or just living here as a Cambodian-American. And at the beginning, it wasn't really, I wasn't like growing really fast or anything, I think. But I was growing, which I thought was cool. But I guess that wasn't necessarily my goal at the very beginning. Like I wanted it to also be kind of my own personal documentation of my journey here, to have a record and be able to look back on, like, especially when it came to recording my progress and learning Khmer, which I
Yeah.
love to look back on, like how I sounded 2 years ago versus now. Um, but I think the point where where I started to gain traction and people really started to resonate was really sharing like how my story, my journey, like being Cambodian American and coming back here to reconnect with my roots and being vulnerable. I think people really appreciate that if I'm just being open and honest. And like I've cried plenty of times on the internet. You can probably find like I'm I'm happy to be vulnerable if it's gonna help somebody else. Like that has been in my position. I've gotten so many amazing, really kind messages from people that really resonate with the feeling of not belonging in Khmer communities, even though you're Khmer, especially when you're born abroad or you've lived abroad for a long time. Also, wanting to reconnect and wanting to learn the language, and so yeah, I would say like really sharing and opening up about why I did this and of course people also like the funny stuff and like they can relate to like when their mom is yelling at them in Khmer or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I was taking a peek out at your social media as well, both TikTok and Instagram, and I think it's one of your pinned reels or posts about if you asked me why I moved to Cambodia, and I watched it through a couple times and was thinking about what you had just mentioned about you know along this journey of learning about culture and Khmer it's kind of driven by like quite a few things, whether it's like you know
Yeah.
it's you're setting all these things aside for culture, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about like how those elements influenced your learning process and like, how you managed to transform like these challenges that you were facing into personal growth.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, that post specifically, I think was like I really opened up and like poured it out. I like to do it through writing, like it gives me time to think about it. But anyways, I I realized that the reason I really wanted to learn Khmer, like while the things that I mentioned earlier are all still true, like the really core reason was like it came down to not feeling like enough, not feeling like I was Khmer enough. Like I felt like if I didn't speak Khmer, I wasn't really Khmer. And it's not just like this internalized thing, but people have actually said that to me, like growing up, like from either family or just people in the community. It's like this really common rhetoric that like you have to know everything about being Cambodian. You have to know the language and to be able to claim the identity. And so, literally, even growing up, I sometimes didn't feel comfortable claiming it because I was like, oh, well, I can't speak Khmer. If you asked me a question about Cambodia, I wouldn't be able to answer. So, like, am I really Khmer? And so it was this journey of being like, okay, I am Khmer no matter what. But it took me a long time to get there, and I felt I think if I didn't, like, I would maybe still feel that way if I didn't speak Khmer, unfortunately. But it was at least acknowledging that, like, the reason I've been able to come this far and learn the language so fast, like in 2.5 years, maybe 3, is really truly because of that, like, that insecurity and that pain. And I think, like, tons of people always ask me, like, how did you learn it so fast? And, like, this and that. And I'm like, the dedication that it took and the commitment it took, it stemmed from that. I think pain is like one of the biggest motivations, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder too, I ask myself, like, if I had been really secure in myself, in my identity without knowing Khmer, I don't know if I would have gotten to this point this quickly, like learning the language. I think it's kind of a give and take. Like I'm really happy with my journey, but I wonder if people are already like, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here though. Like if you're already really secure, no matter, and you don't care about like, okay, I don't need to know the language to be Khmer, which I believe, would people, what would push them? Would they be able to, become fluent in the language? And I'm not saying yes or no, but I do think about that sometimes. I'm like, if I didn't have this like strong, this pain inside of me, would I have been able to get to this point? I don't really know.
Yeah, and the another part of that post that I thought was really interesting too was you encouraging others to also give themselves grace in their journey and connecting back with their cultural roots. How has this journey of reconnecting with your your culture reshaped your identity and sense of belonging? And what advice would you give to others who might be struggling with that similar feeling? Kind of touching on the end of what you were thinking out loud about there at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I think it took me a long time to really embrace that I'm Khmer-Krom American. I think when I first came to Cambodia, I wanted to be full, quote unquote, full Khmer. I wanted to be like a local, and I tried to fit in when I first came. Like I remember before I came, everyone told me like, "Oh, they're gonna know you're American like right away." And so I did my best. I was like hiding. I wanted to be like a local Khmer when I came. I didn't want people to see me as American. And that came from okay, wanting to be seen as Khmer. And then it took a long time that to realize and accept that it's I'm not a local, so like I'm not like I'm never going to be a local, so why am I trying to be a local? And I'm always going to be Khmer American, so I need to embrace being Khmer American. And so that was kind of the thing. I was like, I need to accept this and start to feel more comfortable in my own skin. It's really interesting. I don't know why I was like insecure about being American here, but I really was like I didn't want to be seen as like a foreigner. I wanted to just be accepted as Khmer. But that was my own kind of just like insecurity with it. And when I finally started to accept it and start to like literally even down to what I wore. Like I felt like I needed to dress a certain way to fit in, but I started to make changes like, okay, dressing how I want to dress or like speaking how I want to speak and acting how I want to act to really be me. If I'm being honest, I really lost myself in my first year in Cambodia. This is when I was still living with family. I didn't really know anyone in Cambodia yet. But it was because I was just trying to fit in and like be this quote unquote like Neri Khmer, which means like a Khmer girl. Like I wanted to fit all the expectations that like Khmer women are expected. For example, like being very polite and kind of quiet and submissive and all these things, which I'm just not in a lot of ways. And I lost myself in that way. I found myself like just not talking as much. Like I literally became more quiet, not just because of these expectations, but also it was a language barrier. So like I was constantly like in situations where I couldn't understand anything. So I couldn't speak. I couldn't ask questions because I literally didn't know how to say it in Khmer. So I just was like quiet, and I'm not really a quiet person. So I became more quiet. I talked less and like over the course of the year. And so I guess that's how I would say like I kind of lost touch with who I was. And so it took a while for me to reclaiming my Khmer American identity and trying to be myself and not trying to fit into these local, I wouldn't even say local, but like traditional Khmer expectations of what a Khmer girl or Khmer woman is supposed to be. And yeah, I think this whole journey. And so following back to your question, what advice I would give is I would say to keep reflecting and asking yourself the question, like, why why do I want these things? For example, in my case, why do I want to learn Khmer? And like I knew the whole time, but I just didn't address it. Like I knew that it was because I felt like I wasn't enough, and I would say like embrace, just literally embrace who you are. I know it sounds so cliche, embrace who you are, yeah, but like it's so true.
No,
Like
not at all.
it's like yeah, I am American. I am American in all these ways, and so yeah, I just had to learn. I think I also had to learn to embrace sticking out. Like I wanted to blend in so bad, and I don't know why. It's so weird to think about now because I, at least if you look at my content creator journey, like I am sticking out. I'm not really hiding at all, and that's not what I want. I don't want to hide. I do want to stand out, and so yeah. I guess my advice would be to like yeah, really kind of figure out what it is that you want and why you actually want it, and where that kind of comes from.
Yeah, and especially have fun along the way too. I think what's really cool
Yeah.
about what you do is, you know, you're you mentioned it before, but it's like it is a bit of like progress tracking, but it also is just fun for yourself to look back on of, wow, yeah, this is what I sounded like 2 years ago, and I was trying to say this, and now I sound, significantly better saying it again, or
Yeah.
you can see that progress, and I think it also gives a lot of people motivation to be able to say, oh, okay, I can do this too, and like nothing, nothing's impossible in that sense. But yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, and just to one of the other posts I was taking a look at too was was your time when you were on Vanda's music video, and
Oh
kind
my
of how that
God.
journey was made, and how you kind of are starting, how you're also being getting involved into the music scene in Cambodia with Sabati Fest as well. So it would be great to talk a little bit about that side.
Yeah. For Vanda's music video, it's actually so random. Like, I'm not that like so it's so funny when I posted like people thought I was like friends with Vanda and stuff, and I'm like, no, he doesn't even know who I am. Like, I just happened to know like I had a friend who was kind of like working with the Baramai team for that video specifically. What not even somebody who works for Baramai, and they just like needed extras for this like scene, like a few scenes, and they wanted girl extras like most because for that music video it was 6 years in the games featuring A Witch, and so it was all I think all of the rapper Cambodia, the show that they had, the contest. I think it was all the rappers and contestants in the music video for a lot of these scenes, and so I was literally I don't know why, but I was literally like the only other girl that wasn't one of the rapper contestants. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I here right now? But yeah, and it was such a short scene. Like, it was like a mosh thing, like so fast. Actually, the reason I was not well, okay, yeah. The whole music video was so much bigger than that one tiny thing. But yeah, basically my friend was like, yo, do you want to be in Vanda's music video? And I was like, what? Yeah, sure. And then, yeah, I'm in it for like a split second. If you watch it, you can't even see me because it's so fast, like cut up really fast.
Yeah.
And I did watch that video to like, and like dragged the cursor of YouTube to try to find myself and screenshot those things that you see on my Instagram because otherwise you can't see me in it. Luckily I wore like blue and so I could find where I was. But, yeah, it was just like a coincidence and so random. But I would say, in general, I am a lot like my social circles are a lot of people in the music space here, the music industry. And I think, I don't know, naturally, it's funny because like I work in the NGO space and people assume like, oh, all your friends are people that work for NGOs and are teachers. And I actually have like no friends outside of like my coworkers that are in the NGO space. I think, sorry if there's a friend that works in the NGO space, but for the most part, yeah, a lot of my friends are in music or art, really creative spaces. And I think that's because I'm just really drawn to that. I love those things. I just don't work in it, but I don't know. I guess you could kind of say now I sort of do because my content, but yeah. And so one thing that's cool about Cambodia and Phnom Penh is that a lot of like you're bound to kind of cross paths with people like in your circles are going to mix, and that's like these opportunities just come up, and I realize like you just have to learn to just say yes and do it. So
Maybe just talking about that in more detail. The What do you think the impact is that Baramay has had on obviously all the artists that they've been able to work with?
yeah.
For us, we had Laura on the podcast, and it's one of the most listened episodes we've ever done, and yeah, it's so amazing to see all the things that they're doing, whether it was just the Sabai D Fest and bring all the artists over,
Yeah.
and just the impact Vanda is having specifically on the kind of youth culture and things like that. So how would you explain that?
Like how would I explain their impact
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
yeah. First of all, I think Baramai, and specifically Laura, like, and Andrew, like what they're doing is so amazing. And I think we really saw that in real life when they went to Sabaidi Fest. Like that was the big kind of bridge and kind of kickoff to like really connect. I feel like Cambodia back to the U.S. I know with Vanda that he really blew up kind of like I think 2021 or something, and that's when more and more Cambodian-Americans at least start to know about him. I think in general that's kind of when he started to blow up with like Time to Rise. But that song, I remember when it came out, and it was like a huge deal because it was like, oh, one of like it got like 1 million views, like I think in a day, or I don't know. I might be sorry,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
quote me on that, but I remember I was in college, and me and my best friend, who's also Khmer, we were listening to it, and it had English subtitles, like the music video, and so that was huge for us because we didn't know enough Khmer to understand what they were saying, and so I think Baramai does a really good job of connecting yeah, like Cambodia and Khmer art, Khmer music to English speakers and like the diaspora community. I think that's something that they've been doing a really good job of. I don't know if they do that for all of their songs, but I know recently they also, with like their new artist, Susanna, she like had a music video with Laura Mum as well. And I'm pretty sure they had English subtitles in it. If you haven't seen the music video, I recommend it's beautiful, like shows Khmer culture and Khmer women and everything. But the fact that they're translating into English and making it so much more accessible to other people around the world is internationally really it's huge because I think that's the only thing that's keeping people away, or that's the only barrier is the language, because people do love Khmer culture and they want to be connected and they want to learn about Cambodia and hear the music that's happening. I think the language is just a barrier in terms of understanding. And so Waramai has been honestly changing the whole game. I mean, they're like the leader in the game, right, for
Yeah,
Khmer
yeah.
music industry. But yeah, I really respect what they're doing. I love what they're doing. And I think a lot of people in the US, especially when they went to Sabaidi Fest, really got to see like, oh my God, like Vanda came to the US for the first time and performed. And you could see how many people actually love Vanda in the US. Like that was crazy to me to see. Like I live in Cambodia, so I knew how big Vanda is. But seeing him so big in the US and like, it was actually, I got chills like during that show. Because it really shows like the unity of our Khmer people, both Cambodia and the US. I think a lot of times in Cambodia, I don't think a lot of Cambodians here are really connected to like Cambodian Americans, but I feel like with Vanda and Bandhan and like Baramai, they're really helping to connect. And I feel like I really
Yeah.
resonate with that because that's what I'm doing with my content and what I want to do. And so, yeah, I really appreciate their work.
Yeah, that's something that we've also discussed before is how you want to build that bridge between Khmer Americans and Cambodia. How do you think you want to do that in the future? And I think you'd mentioned about some of these trips that you're planning to bring people
Yeah.
here. And what was that like? Maybe when you were at Sabai D Fest and talking to a lot of Cambodian Americans who were, entertaining, maybe coming and visiting and kind of diving more into the country.
Yeah, so I'm actually planning on announcing this. I think like by the time this episode comes out, it'll be already, maybe people already know. So I am planning to organize these trips for Khmer diaspora to come to Cambodia and travel with me. And the idea really stemmed from, it took me 2 years to kind of get to where I am in terms of my healing journey and like in my relationship with my Khmer identity here in Cambodia. And so I want to open that space for other Khmer diaspora, for example, Cambodian-Americans, to see Cambodia through this kind of experience. A lot of Cambodian-Americans or other diaspora come with their families, or they've never been before. But if they come with their families, they just follow their family around, and like, which is what every family does. Like, you go to like the hometown, you go to Angkor Wat or something. But a lot of people don't have the experience of like seeing it through kind of like with your friends or with people who are also going through this journey of learning about their Khmer identity. And so I want to offer that space. And I also just get so many messages from people, whether they're planning a trip and they're like, where should I go? Or they're like, can we meet up when I go to Cambodia? And as much as I would love to meet up with people, I just don't have the capacity to meet up. Like, I think I can't even count how many times people have asked me to meet. And a lot of times they're just like, I don't know who these people are. And so it's hard. I can't just like meet up with everyone. So I also wanted to take control and like and respond to that, like provide this space for people that they can come to Cambodia and we can actually do it together. We can travel together. We can go to all the main spots that people want to go to, but I also want to show them a lot of things here in Phnom Penh that are growing, like the music scene, the art scene, a lot of things that people don't know about unless you're here, right? So I wanna show that because I think a lot of people who haven't been to Cambodia in a long time or never have been, they're really like still seeing Cambodia only from whatever their parents told them or only from what they're seeing online. So I wanna show so many different spaces. So I'm definitely gonna be looking to figure out what's going to be on that itinerary, like what places and people I want to like connect them with. So, and one last thing, I really want it to be like a healing space, like a healing journey, like definitely focus on like what does this trip mean for people and how is it affecting them and how are they going to come out of this trip. So my idea is maybe like a group of 10 people or something to come travel Cambodia with me, and like this could be a yearly thing or maybe a couple times a year type of thing.
That sounds like a really cool thing to be focusing on. I'm sure it will have a big impact because like 10 people coming and then sharing those stories, it can, create this like ripple effect.
Yeah, for sure. And it would be cool to like I have followers in Australia, New Zealand, France. So I would love to like also invite people from other countries who may have different kind of backgrounds. Like I know for sure I have a ton of Khmer French friends who just have totally different experiences than I do as a Khmer American, but at the same time we have a lot of shared experiences. So yeah, I'd love to open it to more. And who knows, maybe in the future not just Khmer people, but other people that just kind of want like an experience like this.
Okay, great. And what would you say is the greatest piece of advice you've ever been given? This is our traditional closing question.
Okay.
So yeah, just as we're getting to the end of the podcast, is what we like to ask everyone.
The greatest piece of advice I've ever been given. That's really tough. Wow, I should have thought about this ahead of time.
Or it could be one that that you sort of pass on to others.
Yeah.
Regularly.
Wow. I'm trying to rack my brain. I tend to always like be around older people. Like I have an older brother and like all my cousins are older. So I feel like I'm always getting advice. So I'm like, okay. Okay. I'm going to steal one from a podcast. I love listening to podcasts. So, I don't know if this is specifically from him, but I listen to Eddie Pinero, the Your World Within podcast. It's like motivational, but he always says, people always act on who they believe themselves to be. So it's like, if you believe that you're this type of person or you believe you can do this, you're going to act in that way. If you believe you're a different type of person or you can't do this, then you'll act that way as well. And so it's really like a mindset thing, like thinking about everything you want to do and knowing that you can do it. And the type of person that you believe you can be. And yeah, like you will end up becoming that person. Like I believed that I could learn Khmer, and now I can do it. If I didn't think I could do it, I probably wouldn't have been able to. So yeah, I would say that's probably the best advice.
Yeah, I also agree with that. And like, at least when I look around and see like some of the people that people respect the most and like, let's say, want to associate, it's always these people that are really being truly who they are and they're really authentic. And you can just kind of feel it. You can just feel it when someone's putting on a front or just not really being who they are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I totally agree. Authenticity is definitely one of my core values.
Mm.
It's really important to me, and yeah, I totally agree. Like nobody, you get an icky feeling when, when you can tell people are like not really being authentic to themselves, and I think that's what allows me to build such like authentic connections with some people in my community as
Mm.
well. Yeah.
Great. Well, on that note, we really want to thank you for coming on the podcast today. It's been great to learn about your journey and excited to see the impact you have over the coming years.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for having me on the Rising
Yes.
Giants. I've been wanting to come on for a long time. It's funny. So going back to when I started learning about Cambodia back in college, I actually found your podcast and
Oh,
listened to your podcast like in 2020. So
wow.
Oh wow.
yeah, or 2021
The
or something
Zoom
like that.
days.
Yeah.
Zoom days. Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow, we
it's
have
kind
a
of full
true
circle.
OG in the house.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we do appreciate the support. We also really appreciate the time that you took to with us today. It was a great episode, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what you'll accomplish next. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys.